Picture a harbor at night, somewhere on the coast of Syria, more than 3,000 years ago. The city is called Ugarit. It is rich, it is old, it has stood for centuries, trading gold and copper and grain with the greatest kingdoms on earth. And it is burning. In the ruins, archaeologists would later find a clay tablet, a letter, the last words of a king who never got to send them. The enemy ships are already here. They have set fire to my towns and done terrible things. Do you not know that all my troops are gone? Help never came. No one wrote back. Because everyone else was burning too. Within a single generation, nearly every great power around the eastern Mediterranean would fall. Cities that had stood for 1,000 years turned to ash. Whole kingdoms vanished from the map. Writing itself was forgotten. And here's the strange part. To this day, no one is completely sure why. This is the story of the first apocalypse. And the eerie way it still echoes now. Let's go back to the world before the fire. Around 1200 BC, the eastern Mediterranean was not a scatter of isolated tribes. It was a network, a club of superpowers, all tangled together. In the south, Egypt. The pharaoh sat in his palace on the Nile, richer than any man alive, his monuments already ancient. To the north, the Hittites, a warrior empire carved into the highlands of what is now Turkey, ruling from a mountain capital called Hattusa, ringed by stone walls and carved lions. Across the sea, the Mycenaeans, the Greeks of legend, the world of gold masks and heavy walls, the people who would one day be remembered in the songs of Troy. And between them, a constellation of others. Babylon, Assyria, the island of Cyprus, heavy with copper, and trading cities like Ugarit, where the letters of a dozen languages piled up in the archives. These kingdoms were connected, deeply connected. Their kings wrote to each other, and they called each other brother. We know this because the letters survived. In Egypt, at a site called Amarna, hundreds of clay tablets were found, royal mail between the great powers. In them, kings trade gifts and complaints. They arrange marriages. They beg for gold. One ruler scolds another for sending a bride without enough jewelry. It reads, honestly, like family drama. Powerful people, all in each other's business. And under the diplomacy ran trade. Enormous, ceaseless trade. We have proof of that too. Off the coast of Turkey lies a shipwreck, more than 3,000 years old, called Uluburun. When divers finally mapped it, they found a floating treasure of the ancient world. 10 tons of copper, a ton of tin, glass, ebony, ivory from hippos and elephants, amber that came all the way from the Baltic, pottery from Greece, gold from Egypt, cargo from at least 7 different cultures, riding in the belly of one ship. Think about what that means. Bronze, the metal that named the age, required copper and tin was rare. It had to be carried across thousands of miles, from distant mines to distant workshops. Every sword, every plow, every ornament of the age depended on that long, fragile chain. The whole system worked beautifully, as long as nothing broke it. Something broke it. The collapse did not happen in a day. It rolled across decades like a wave, but when it hit almost everywhere. One by one, the great cities died. Mycenae burned, Pylos burned, its palace never rebuilt. Hattusa, the Hittite capital, abandoned and put to the torch. Ugarit gone and never lived in again. By the time the smoke cleared, the map of the ancient world had been wiped nearly blank. So what happened? For a long time, the ancient sources pointed to one enemy. The Egyptians called them the Sea Peoples. On the walls of a temple, the pharaoh Ramesses III carved his version of events. A great confederation, he said, came out of the sea and the islands. No land could stand before them. He named the fallen. The Hittites gone. Cyprus gone. City after city swept away. The Sea Peoples came for Egypt too, and Egypt, in these carvings, wins. But it is a hollow victory. After this, even mighty Egypt shrinks back, poorer and smaller, and never quite recovers. For centuries that was the answer. Mysterious raiders from the sea, burning the world down. But modern scholars are not convinced it is that simple. Because who were the Sea Peoples, really? And why did they appear all at once? The truth is, we still don't know exactly who they were. And a growing number of historians think they were less an invading army and more a symptom, refugees, desperate people themselves fleeing something worse. So what was the something worse? Here the evidence turns to the Earth itself. First, drought. Scientists have studied ancient pollen buried in the mud of lakes and seabeds, and the record shows it clearly. Right at the end of the Bronze Age, the climate turned. A long, brutal dry spell settled over the region, lasting decades, in some places far longer. Crops failed, and we can hear the panic in the letters. From several kingdoms, the same desperate word repeats. Grain. Send grain. There is famine, and we will die. Then, the ground began to shake. Geologists have found evidence of a cluster of powerful earthquakes striking the region within a few decades. Some call it an earthquake storm, toppled walls, collapsed palaces, ruined cities, all in a narrow window of time. And so, the leading idea today is not one villain, it is many all at once. The historian Eric Klein calls it a perfect storm, drought and famine and earthquakes, invasion and rebellion, trade routes cut, and each disaster made the next one worse. Because remember the network, remember how connected they all were. That was their strength. It was also, in the end, their weakness. When one kingdom fell, it stopped trading. When trade stopped, tin stopped moving. When the metal stopped, others could not arm themselves. When hunger spread, people moved. When people moved, they became the raiders at the next city's gate. The very connections that made them rich passed the collapse from one to the next, like a current through a wire. Scholars call this systems collapse, a world so interlocked that when enough threads snapped, the whole web unraveled. Not one blow, a cascade. And when it was over, what was left? A darkness. Historians actually call it that. A dark age. In Greece, the change is staggering. The great palaces are gone. And so is writing. The Mycenaeans had a script we call Linear B. After the collapse, it simply vanishes. For roughly 400 years, the Greeks forget how to write entirely. Populations crashed, villages emptied, the grand art and monuments stopped, the memory of what had been faded into myth. When the Greeks later told stories of Mycenae and heroes and a war at Troy, they were reaching back across a gap they could no longer truly see. But collapse is never only an ending. In the ashes, something new took root. The old empires were gone, and into that space stepped smaller peoples. This is the world where the Phoenicians would spread their alphabet across the sea, an alphabet that is the ancestor of the letters you are reading now. It is the world that would eventually give rise to classical Greece and to Rome. And there was one more change, born partly from the crisis itself. With the tin trade shattered, bronze grew scarce, so people turned to a metal that was harder to work, but everywhere in the ground: iron. The age that rose from the ruins would be the Iron Age. So why does a collapse from over 3,000 years ago still matter? Because look closely at what fell, not primitive villages. An advanced, connected, globalized world. Rich cities, long supply chains, superpowers who thought their order was permanent. They were bound together by trade in a single crucial resource. They depended on routes that stretched across the entire known world, and they seem never to have imagined it could all just stop. And then, in the space of a lifetime, it did. We like to think collapse is loud, a single enemy at the gate. But the Bronze Age suggests something quieter and more frightening, that the most sophisticated systems can be the most fragile, that prosperity built on distant, tangled connections can come apart faster than anyone believes possible. The kings of Ugarit never saw it coming. They were still writing letters, still asking for grain and ships, right up until the fire reached the archive and baked their final words into clay. Those words survived precisely because the world ended, burned hard enough to last 3,000 years. A message, you might say, from one connected world to another.